Nate McConnell. Automating your offensive security. Nate has been working in information technology for 12 years, with most of his time spent in roles in operations, managing both Windows and Linux environments for the security and the security of them. Thank you, Nate.
Thank you. Let me first off start by apologizing. This was initially supposed to be in the teaching track that was supposed to be out, for more beginners. This is designed for your small to medium businesses that don't have, the security funds, the security programs designed and built. So let's look at small businesses. What are the problems they face? Money, resources, and time. Why is that? And please chime in, conversational. I want to make this as casual as possible.
Security is not a priority for small business.
Security isn't a priority. Why? It's not. Why isn't money there? Not a lot. There's not a lot of funding. They're not big. They're not bringing in sales. Then if you look at them, why don't the admins have time?
Some of the places don't have a full-time admin, they just have a guy that comes in every once in a while.
That, or like with a couple of my previous gigs, I was the only guy doing help desk, network admin, sysadmin, managing both, internal and external. You don't have it. So what goes to the wayside? Security, or they set it up, half-ass it, and keep moving on. Resources. Money and funding, obviously. Money's not coming in. Hardware. Thankfully, hardware for security isn't hard to get a hold of. With virtualization technology, you can run a security machine right there off your own laptop, stand up another desktop, there you go. And the other thing is put up something like a small single 1U blade server, put your firewall software on there for very inexpensive. You can put a security workstation off there, dedicated NICs, away you go. But most places I've seen don't even have that. They stand up, either their little home routers or, your very cheap Soho firewalls, and they're kind of left with that. So it's knowledge. And now, please preface this by saying, I'm not picking on small businesses. Some do have a lot of talent, but a lot of times the admins and the people in the small to medium business, don't have the knowledge needed to secure their environment. The reason that is they're coming fresh out of school, they're coming fresh out of a frontline support position, or they're the 60-year-old guy that's frankly at the end of their career. They're just there to ride out, to be done. The problem I have with these are your small businesses tend to be, some of the small to medium businesses tend to be the targets point because they don't have the attack point. They're usually very innovative, and they're easy to get in. They're easy to get in, they're easy to steal the data, easy to get back out, and they'll never know they're there. Problem I have with this, as I said, the computer degree, the guys coming out of school, is, as I've seen, and now again, this is just me personally, these guys, as they're teaching your basic, put up your firewall, patch your servers, put everything together. And they say, do this, do this, do this, do this, but they never connect the dots. They never show the offensive side of this. And that's what this talk is going to be about once we get into this a little bit further here. Excuse me. Technical difficulty. So how do we fix all this? Any ideas? Any comments? How do we fix the problems that these admins are facing?
Automation.
Automation's one.
Managed service providers.
Managed service providers. But here's the problem. Cost. Any other ideas?
If they're coming out of school, maybe better education on...
Better education. And personally, I think it's things like this, BSides. Getting, the community more involved in this. Once we start building this community, what happens? We get the new admin that's curious about security, curious about putting everything together and doing this. Gotta have a plan. What's up?
So the problem is yes, this is happening at grassroots level, and that's great. But the problem is where the education needs to be at is at the C level, at the boss level, and make them aware so that they see a need for this.
Well, I agree with you, but I also disagree. If we're not educating our admins, and our admins don't know how to secure it, how can I go back to the boss and say, yes, we need this hardware, we need this funding? How can I build that if I can't even, as an admin, properly educate my employers?
But on the other side, the boss might say, hey, I'm really worried about this, I'm going to go pay for a third-party assessment.
Agreed. That is a very good point. The problem I have with that, though, and again, this is just me, is that as we build this, as we, the boss, half the time the boss is who? A CEO, sales guy, has no technical background, typically doesn't care. He's the one that says, stand it up and make it work. I will agree, though, that there are the bosses, there are the people that say, you know what? Yeah, we do need to invest in this. We need to get a third party in. Or we need to pay to get our guy the training so that he can build the security.
I think a lot of it also has to do with risk awareness. If you're talking at whatever level of an admin, if they don't have the knowledge and they don't know what they're looking for, somewhere along the line, right, they have to gain that knowledge. But then in order to talk up to a business level individual, they need to be able to know how to communicate that risk so that way the business owners can even look at it and say, okay, we want to take that risk on, or we don't want to. They could look at what it's going to cost to fix that. Exactly.
And I will completely agree with that. But as we continue to build the knowledge here at the grassroots level and build our admin's knowledge, they're going to get the business experience from being, in meetings and talking to these people and gaining that. And once they start to understand what the risk is and once they're able to start determining what that risk really is, communicating that up the chain, so it should become second nature. So, as I said, you got to have a plan for what we're doing. You got to discover the information. You have to know what's out there. You have to start documenting it. And as I'm going to speak to in a minute here, as you can see, documentation, it's a repeating trend. Testing and validation. And once that's done, you've got to remediate it. You've got to fix these problems. Before you begin, take a step back, breathe. Make sure you have access to everything. And I'm going to be a prime example of this. Failure on my part. Doing an audit at a previous employer. Going through everything I thought I had proper access. I knocked over a production server. And, well, I didn't have access. The ash chewing I took for that one, was not fun. Make sure you have everything broken down. If you can, spend a weekend, segment your network. This is not a goal to secure everything at once. You're not going to build a security program and automate it by trying to take on the whole network at once. You want to get your critical infrastructure, your firewalls, your servers, the network layer done first. Then once you're there, start looking at your web applications. Then looking at your desktops, your phones, your printers, those types of things. Those are attack points, but you can adjust from there. You can't take your domain controller, you can't take your DNS servers off the network very easily. Can I take a PC off the network because it's been compromised? Yeah. But how many in this room, if your DNS server went down or was compromised, what kind of impact would that have on your business? Or your domain controller? That's down. Network's not going anywhere. And then take the time to fix issues. If you know you've got problems with the switch, you've got issues with connectivity, fix these before you start your security assessment. Otherwise, when you're doing your assessment, someone's going to come back and say, you're doing this assessment, you broke it. And in reality, something else is broken. Web applications, I'm not going to say, go check these things. You're not looking for cross-site scripting. You're not looking for SQL injection at this point. There's just too much to cover in a time frame like this. And I could sit up here and talk about it all day. Not worth it. But what you do need to check, and again, this is going to be looked at later, is look at port 80. Look at 443. make sure your development frameworks are patched. So if you're running .NET 1.1 or even 2.0, you know, there's vulnerabilities, there's problems in those. You know, are you using Java? Heaven forbid. You know, hope you're not. Are you using things like Joomla, Drupal, WordPress sites? You know, different forums, shopping carts. Those things commonly do have vulnerabilities published. And that's where you're going to run into problems. Because those are exploitable, those have easy weaponized tools that are out there to get in. Take the time to make sure those are patched. You know, look at the regular vulnerability postings, the sites, Exploit Hub, not Exploit Hub, Exploit DB, you know, Metasploit's got a great one. Let's see, Security Focus also has another great spot to look for those. The first thing you want to do though, now let's get into the real meat of what this is about. How do you do it? How do you connect the dots from, you know, you're patching this, how do you take that offensively? Let's look at it from the standpoint of an attacker. Do an nmap scan, nmap-sp for your IP range. That's just going to be a simple ping scan. It looks over everything. Once you have that, you can start going back through, pulling out the specific IP addresses for it. And once you have that, now you've built a base for, here's a list of IPs that I can start working with. I know I can scan these, and this is where I want to go. And hopefully, as I said, you've segmented your network. If your network is segmented, you're scanning a very small subset. You're not scanning your whole network. This is where some of that time problem comes in. If I have to manually go back and pull 200 IP addresses out of a big list because, well, I don't have my network segmented and I'm scanning, gotta do this. One, I'm losing time there. Second, I lose time when I'm scanning it and trying to go through my vulnerability discovery, my service discovery. You just lose a lot of time there and it makes your life miserable. Documentation. I'll be the first to say it, I hate it, but it's the most important thing you're going to do in any program in IT. Between network documentation, application documentation, server documentation. If you don't have it, you're going to fail. Any thoughts as to why that is? Why is documentation so important?
Business continuity.
Business continuity?
It's just hard to remember everything that you're doing sometimes. You know, you might be, you know, going along and you do your scan of all your hosts or whatever. You don't document it. You focus on some and you forget about the others, or you know, you just kind of go down a rabbit hole somewhere and you're like, you know, what was I working on? You know, what did I find before? What have I fixed? What, you know, what haven't I fixed? So, because I have a bad memory.
Same thing what he said. I find that if I come up with my documentation even on a daily basis or even a weekly basis of things I've come across now, and I can reference it later, you can also share that information with other security professionals or IT admins or other people that you work with, so that you can actually collaborate and even move forward. So it can be used as a teaching opportunity.
Exactly.
You might, having additional budget, you can hire someone else to help you rather than spend time getting you up to speed. You can read the manual.
Exactly.
If you wrote one.
Just the other thing is sometimes you never know when you're going to need the information later. Because I can't tell you how many times that I've run into something and I've just fixed it, and then you know, it may have taken me a couple hours to figure out what to do, and I didn't really think to document it. And then like 18 months later, I run into something saying like, oh, what the hell did I do? I have to back through everything I've done and go, oh yeah, that's how I fix this.
And to go on to that, I don't mean to swear, but it could be good with compliance. Being able to have documentation.
Yep.
So I'll play the noob in the room. So what things are the most important things to document, and what things can we kind of like stick off to the side and maybe get to if we have time?
If you've got the time, document everything. But what I document is host name, IP address. I document at least where my credentials are stored. You know, I can't remember all my credentials. Then I go to a breakdown and I document every application and service that is running on every host. You start to get to a large environment, that's time consuming, But when I've got 60 web servers up and I need to know what version of IIS or Apache is running, what development frameworks there, what software is sitting on top of that. As I start to build all that out, I can easily say, you know what, I'm going to focus my scan, new Apache bug came out this week. I can focus my scan on these hosts. So the more you document, the more you have, but it's going to cost you more time up front.
I think it's also important to base it on a risk assessment. Work with your institution and say, or IT saying, what monetary loss would happen if this exploit occurred? And then document based on the severity of the risk.
And that's definitely great for when as you're going through your vulnerability assessment and scanning this. But when you're building your initial documentation, or at least for me, if I document everything I have on every server as I'm going through the environment, it makes it real easy for me to then go back later and say, you know what, new bug was out, I can check these servers, I know what's here, I know what version, okay, I know these ones aren't even affected. I can very easily pick and pull out the data I have. If I don't have that documentation, I'm starting back from square one again.
Kind of the new question of what tools do you use to document it besides like an Excel sheet or something like that?
Unfortunately, that's the very best thing.
Okay.
An Excel spreadsheet, I keep a wiki up.
Wikis are useful.
Yeah.
Wikis are very useful. The other thing I keep, I have probably a 7 foot wide by about 4 foot tall whiteboard in my office that I write things down. One piece of advice I give, this is just a personal preference, do not write any of this stuff down on paper and pen. Do not. Unless you've got a great shredder and you're shredding every piece of information. Because if you just crumple it up, throw it in the garbage can, that's not to say someone's not walking by and pulling that out. But really, you've got MS 08067 running live on the network. Let's have some fun. So, I mean, that's those types of things. Where a whiteboard, I can clean it, erase it, walk away, nobody's getting that data. And again, how to document, spreadsheets. I mean, my typical spreadsheet for a small environment is around, depending on the number of hosts, 70 to 80 tabs. They're big. But I've got tabs for each individual server. I have tabs for what vulnerabilities are found, when I remediated them, what was done to remediate them, and then links back to my wiki or other pages.
Why not a database?
Reason being is you can definitely easily do it on a database local. I typically don't have a database on my machine, and I don't like storing this information out on the network. I like keeping it local to me. The wiki I can install local. A lot of times I'll put my wiki on the network, but having the spreadsheet local and then backed up to the network, if everything goes down or something breaks, I want to be able to have a quick and easy access. Well, the other thing I recommend, Guestio. It's an IP address management software. Between a couple of different ways, you can either use CVS imports, you can have it scan the network. It gives you a nice view of what you have. Here's your IP addresses, here's your host names. It keeps track of what's up, what's down, makes it real quick and easy to reference back to for just your IP address management. And then it's easy to say, okay, here's my server block, here is my printers, workstations blocks, here's my network infrastructure block, and it makes it real easy to go back and reference to. Now let's figure out what's running. If you don't know what's running on your hosts, you don't know what's vulnerable. The script I use is just a real simple bash one-liner, but that host file that we built previously by doing that ping scan, especially if you've got your network segmented properly, this will just go and read through that file and one by one. And then it'll output, several different file formats for you to go back and look at. It gives you a nice basic overview of your network. It gives you an overview of what's there. And it makes it really easy to go back and look at. It's greppable, there's XML formats, plus there's a nice human readable format that's outputted here. The benefit to this is once it's done, you've got a good baseline. Okay, once you're all done, power up all these files, store them. Now, the next time you run your scans, you can go back and start doing comparisons, looking for differences. Nice thing, take that XML file, import everything into Metasploit. It'll give you a breakdown of all your hosts, the services, makes it really easy to see, and it starts giving you a lot of useful information. This is where I actually start to build a lot of my spreadsheet, is off of that services page. There's just a little screenshot of what it shows you. But it shows you port, is it TCP, UDP, the version information, what it is. And it's very easy to copy that information in, start breaking it down into a spreadsheet. For now you know what host it is, what services are running, what ports it's on. Now the nice thing, vulnerabilities. This is what a lot of us all enjoy. Where do you find them? How do you find them? Got a couple of ideas up here. Anybody else? What do you use to find the vulnerabilities?
Well, there's vulnerability scanners, right?
There is, but
you can use community edition of Nexpose or Nessus and import it back into Metasploit PostgreSDB.
you can. But at least with Nessus, the community edition, the license states you cannot use this in your production environment or your corporate environment. It has to be personal.
Open
Well,
that.
you can purchase the, it's only about $1,000. right?
$1,700 is what I last looked at. So some companies you have.
The Nessus fee.
Nessus is definitely great. But for some companies, at least with, not my last job, before where I'm at now, but before that, I couldn't even get them to spend $300 to upgrade our firewall because they felt it was good enough. So how do you take and find that information? You've got, as I said, Exploit DB, Security Focus. Metasploit's website has some good information. There's OpenVAS, there's a couple of other things. Anybody else got any recommendations, suggestions?
I mean, as far as Nmap, is there a little NSC screens that will pretty much give you the same information as a lot of vulnerability scanners will.
Unfortunately, there's a small subset of information that can be obtained here. As Rob said, you've got packet store, you've got all these different places out there, but it's a very small subset, and that's why, as an admin, you have to be very diligent in going out checking these things. You've got to be constantly on top of it. Testing and validation, I'm going to state this right now. If you're not comfortable, you haven't run exploit code, you haven't used Metasploit, you haven't used, some of these other commercial tools, if you're lucky enough to have your hands on them, stop, don't do it. Turn around, walk away, do not pass go, do not collect $200. The reason being, you run it wrong, you're breaking something. You're knocking something over.
So you just use virtual machines then, right?
You can use a virtual machine, yes, but depending, if you're testing in an enclosed environment on something that's not production, absolutely go ahead. But if you're scanning your production environment, your critical infrastructure, and you think, oh yeah, I see this vulnerability here. You launch exploit code, and the return address is wrong, something else is wrong in there, and instead of actually dropping into a shell like you think, now you just denial of service or you've crashed the service, and you brought that down, what's going to happen?
No one notices.
You're going to hope no one notices, and you're going to be fighting real quick to try to get it back up. And that's the problem that, at least for me, and this is where this whole talk originated from, is going through school and going through some of my previous admin jobs, it was always told, as I said, patch, apply your firewall rules. Make sure your users and groups are managed properly. Make sure you're separating your users out from this group and your printers are over in this OU. Make sure you're, in the Windows world where I come from mostly, is apply your proper group policies. Make sure your password policies are right. And they said, you've got these vulnerabilities out there, you'll check, you'll run the Microsoft's baseline analyzer, you may run Nessus, you'll see these things, but they never said, how do you connect the dots? how do you look at it from another perspective and know, okay, I do these things, I see these ports open, these firewall rules aren't applied correctly, what's the risk, what's the mitigations, and how do you combat that? That's where this, taking this approach and looking at it from an outside in, scanning it, looking for those vulnerabilities, and then getting to this point, the testing and validation. If you're comfortable with it, you're a Unix guy, Linux guy, and you've done this type of stuff before, and you run it and you can see, yeah, I can get in. Okay, now we know that there is that vulnerability. You've got a problem you need to fix.
Just another comment. If there is something you guys are researching, please come down to DC 801. I've got servers and virtual machines that we can research exploits on. If you're putting work into an exploit, researching it, it'd be nice to share with everybody.
Definitely. And the thing about it is, if you can stand these up in a virtual machine, great. You kill it, kick it right back over. Let's see if I had something here. Bear with me one moment. I'm trying to get caught up on my slides over here. It's better to not do this. The one thing I will say about that is if you don't launch exploit code, you test it, but you say, I'm not comfortable going further, the next time you scan it, you're going to see a difference. You've applied that firewall rule to mitigate it, you're going to see these differences in your results, and it's going to come back, you're going to get the same result, you're just not adding that risk. So that would be my personal recommendation on that. Remediation. List of stuff up here. What else can you do to fix these vulnerabilities? What else can be done to keep someone out? Thoughts, comments?
Educate your users on defensive computer use.
Defensive practices, yep. Smart community practices. Don't be clicking on the random links. But what about from a technical perspective of, my thoughts are users will always be users and they're done. That's just my thoughts and feelings on them. And you're always going to have bad code. You're always going to have problems. I've had this discussion before with people. Firewalls aren't the end-all be-all, but they're a great thing. But they themselves are exploited and broken. So you've got to have multiple layers, but what else can we do as a community to start protecting your infrastructure? Thoughts, comments, opinions?
I like the top 20 list that SAMS puts out of the critical controls.
Education, top 20 controls.
The sec tools, I think it's sectools.org, they list the top 125.
It's top 125 new tools or tools that are out there. The one thing that I left off here that, in my honest opinion, is probably the most important: hard work and dedication to it. Because there's going to be, every day there's new vulnerabilities found, new exploits released, there's new ways to bypass. Unfortunately, you can't protect against everything all the time. There's always someone smarter than you. The other problem is you've always got users that, as I said, dumb, they like to click links, they like to download that new program, that new screensaver that looks so cool, and it gets them in. The thing about it is segmentation's very powerful. Don't run unneeded services. Stop things. And then, if you can, just take and isolate your production environment, your main stuff, and keep everybody out of it. That's at least one factor. So we're going a little bit quicker than I had expected. Time problem. As I've said, we've got these tools at our disposal, we've got all this information to get it. How do we solve the time? Automation. How do you automate something like this? Without, especially in a small to medium business environment, how do you automate something like this? You've got, as I said, Nexpos, Nessus, some of these other tools, well, what else can we be doing as admins and, security guys to solve these, to automate this?
Implementing simple things like patch management tools, like, as everyone hates it, but simple things like WSUS, automatic remediation in the background.
Exactly. WSUS is a great one. You've got Spacewalk for Linux systems to help push and manage patches. Unfortunately, patch management is one of those things that I don't care what company you're in, is a problem. With where I'm at now at HP, we have, I think it's 20,000 hosts we're managing and maintaining within our group. Managing patches for that was a nightmare. And then when I was at previous employment with 20 servers, keeping patch management up for that was just as bad because of the time. So that's definitely one. How else can you?
Well, one thing with WSS, where I'm employed, we are using Sequoia CSI for third-party things, and we tie it through WSS. So I can at one spot patch all the Microsoft nonsense, but also patch all the Adobe and Java nonsense at the same time.
Okay, what else can we do to help this? Because patching's one thing, but how do you know if your patches were successful? How do you know that when you've made these changes, what else has changed in your network? What else can we do? Any thoughts, comments?
You can use MBSA and run it from the command line and output the data to text files, and then use a parser to rip through it.
Yep. What about in a Linux environment?
Let's use Puppet.
Puppet, Chef, those are some good things.
Salt stack.
What was that last one?
Salt.
Salt, S-A-L-T.
I ran Puppet and I recommend Salt.
It's locally developed too.
Yep.
This is something that's hard to do. There's not a lot of great tools, but have a big display, a big monitor that's open to the public that shows our current risk level and help educate.
Some of the things I do, and I'm going to get a little bit ahead of myself here, is I've got some scripts that I've actually built. Unfortunately, a couple of them are lost and missing at the moment. The VM that they were on died. It was an Nmap series of shell scripts, Nmap scripts, and Python scripts that would run, scan my environment, go back, parse that current scan, compare it to a baseline that I had set. If it did not match up to what was expected, it sent me an email and a text message and says, hey, these things are changed. You've got something that's been new added to the network, that's been opened up on one of these boxes, and you need to look at this, or this is closed, why is that? And it made it real easy for me to say, okay, here it is. And I actually had these same scripts integrated with Nagios. So it was running on a regular basis. So it would go out and scan and say, here's this security vulnerability. Here are these services that are open. Here's the versions. This has changed. You've got a problem. Something new came up. I could always tell when our developers were standing up new web servers. Come up in the IP range, immediately scanned, and say, hey, this one's up. What's going on here? And I was able to take and limit that exposure we had, because we unfortunately had some developers that would like to test and try new things out. They'd expose it publicly. Smack them around a little bit, close it back down, bring them back in. 2 weeks later, here they're doing it again. And because of it, we actually did have a breach. They stood it up, and that's what started this whole process for me. Is they stood it up, it breached, I had to go back in, clean it up, lock them back out, and that's, as I said, started me thinking about how do I do this on a regular basis and keep up with it. Some good stuff. Shell script that I wrote for automating that scan process. Pull all the data, start your Nmap scans. Real basic, real simple, but it'll go through and start the scan. You do your ping scan, pull the IP addresses out, launch your Nmap, it'll actually tar it all up and bundle that up. The one I like though is for these two up here, the exploit search. I don't know how many of you have ever used exploitdb.com. Have you ever had problems getting on their site where it's just dog slow? This one, the exploit searcher will actually go through, parse their site if you want to. They told me it's okay in a limited fashion. However, the nice thing about it is that it has an option to download and install a local copy of their database that you can search, parse, and pull out all the information. It'll tell you what file it is, what versions, what OSs are vulnerable. Makes it real easy to go through. And same thing with bug track. Myself and a gentleman by the name of Rob Clark at HP, that's one of our security architects, we built and designed the script to go out to Security Focus's website. Start download the vulnerability information right from their site and give you a list of this is vulnerable, and this is vulnerable. And well, that's pretty much it for me. Any comments, questions, concerns?
I think it's important to search different sources and everything like that. There's also different services out there, like Security, or else Purdue has